What was the best moment you've seen where the real world hit a spoiled rich kid? This kid was a 17-year-old in my dad's hometown that was known for driving fast and being an all-around asshole on the road. He had multiple speeding tickets and a DUI on record. At 17, the DUI incident was actually a car crash that totaled his car and led to him having his jaw wired shut. So what do his parents do? They give him his license back and buy him a brand new car, which I'm pretty sure was a WRX, which crashed into a utility truck, killing himself, his sister and her friend, while doing almost twice the speed limit on a residential road. Knew a rich kid whose parents bought a car for, and he treated it like absolute garbage. Purposely driving it really hard and generally abusing it, confident in the notion that his parents would buy him the one he wanted after he destroyed the one they got him. Well, they didn't buy him another one, ever. He rode the city bus and bummed rides off of friends after that. He was the most entitled fucker I'd ever met. If he was over at your house, he would just help himself to whatever was in the fridge, like it was some sort of paid buffet. Spoiled rich kid showed up to school in a $325,000 sports car. He was showing off, lost control of the car, and drove it through a brick wall and totaled it. Dad buys a rich kid a Mercedes. It was pinkish, salmon colored, so the kid bitched about it. Dad took two away, sold it, and never bought him another car. Rich brat had to buy his own. One of my college roommates was very rich growing up. I didn't realize just how rich until I had to explain to her what a coupon was in very extensive detail. On multiple occasions she bragged that she wasn't even interested in her major, philosophy, or college in general, but she was at uni because her parents were requiring her to get a degree, any degree, in order to get access to her trust fund. I don't remember ever seeing her go to class, and she eventually got expelled sophomore year over academic dishonesty. I guess this was the last straw for her parents, because they cut her off pretty soon after that. This actually served as a wake-up call. She somehow managed to get a public health degree at a different school in spite of the academic dishonesty listed on her transcript. She's doing pretty well for herself these days. We've kept in touch, and last we talked she was considering grad school. Oh, I have one. I used to work at Starbucks, and there was a girl that was just newly hired and in training. Mind you, she was 20 years old and her parents made her get a job. She grew up in a very wealthy family. On her first or second day, I had instructed her to do the dishes to help catch us up for closing. She looked at me with these lost eyes and told me she doesn't know how. Apparently she grew up with housemaids and literally has never cleaned a dish in her entire life. I had to teach her step by step how to clean a dish. About 10 years ago I was having a pint with a friend of mine. His family shit gold, I swear. I mentioned I was struggling with rent and bills while in college, and he just said, "Get your mum to pay for it then, mate. She's disabled and we've never had real money." He instantly realized what he said and did feel bad about it. I think it was the first time he really understood that not everyone has their parents to lean on financially. Somewhat distant relative spent all of his university years and 20s partying hard with the 100-120k allowance his rich company owning father gave him each year. He'd travel the world each year, going to Bali, Thailand, Europe, every year Oktoberfest, just rampaging. At 32 or so he decided to settle in upscale ski resort area of the US and open a business with his hot gold digger fiancée. When he went to transfer his money to his US bank account, he noticed it only came to a few $1,000s. He angrily asked the bank worker why she hadn't transferred the entire amount, only to be told that that was the entire amount. His father had cut him off without saying anything, and he just hadn't noticed. Absolute flatline. While working in a casino here in Las Vegas, a herd of girls came to my window, and one proceeded to tell me about a great birthday party itinerary that her dad had paid for her 18th birthday. With no adult in the party, just a bunch of teenage girls out in Vegas, where none of them could do anything because none of them were 21. I couldn't even check them into their reservation. They start yelling and screaming at me. I calmly call security, and security tells them they can either go play in the arcade or leave and try to find a hotel off the strip that will take them and out being 21. The anger turns to tears. The security guard is unmoved. I went to school with a kid who always had a new fancy car or truck because his dad owned one of the biggest construction companies in the area. This kid was a major douche and double/triple parked his big trucks all the time. Once he got some sort of fast fancy car and went over 110 miles per hour and was getting chased by state police. He had friends in the car that were telling him to stop and slow down, but he wouldn't. I believe he was also drunk. He ended up crashing into a business doing a ton of damage. He got hit with 3 to 4 felonies. Driving over 100 miles per hour is a crime in most states, and he got multiple kidnapping charges because the passengers were freaking out. Dude never came back to school, and I have no clue what he's doing now. Rich scummy injury lawyer's kid was in my class in HS. Goes to college, mid-size school in the Midwest, and gets plastered drunk. Parents bought him and his friends alcohol since freshman year, so nothing new, and Rat says he has to write him up for alcohol in the dorms. Punches Turaz, then gets cops called on him and knocks a cop's tooth out. Long story short, his parents have to drive back 6 to 7 hours after one day to get him, and he's not even allowed to leave the state until his hearing. Last I heard, he's working at a fast food establishment. Freshman year of college, the guy across the hall from me is a spoiled rich kid from a big southern city. Old money clearly coming out his ass. A couple weeks into the second semester, he and a buddy found a checkbook on the sidewalk. Stupid fuckers decided to write themselves a check and cash it in the bank that the account is in. The teller immediately called the cops and they both got arrested. We talked the night he got arrested, and he laughed and said his dad would take care of it and everything would be fine. That weekend we met his dad as they moved everything out of the dorms since his dumbass got expelled. Guess daddy didn't take care of it. I knew one who apparently couldn't fathom how people live on a budget. We used to hang out a lot at her insistence, but she liked to eat at expensive places, whereas I'd have no issue having my meals somewhere cheaper. However, she kept pouting and insisting I stay. I said I couldn't unless she wanted to spot me. She didn't. I then walked her through the math and showed her that the cost of my meals with her every day totaled my entire wage for the month. She didn't stop pouting, but from then on I could eat by myself in peace. My best moment was when I got hired by a pair of Woodside, California parents to transition their horrible 18-year-old into the realities of real life, something that evaded both of them. My first action was to take away his Platinum, Limitless credit cards. He threw a tantrum that lasted several days. Where am I going to get money? Get a job. My parents will fire you. They didn't. When he realized that boundaries and budgets had been set in stone, and that he not only had to pay the bills, the rent, but taxes too, he headed straight to college to wait out the next 4 years. He is still a little jerk, but at least he has a job and an education now. I had a room at my freshman year of college that came from an incredibly rich oil family from the Middle East. I remember him having the hardest time adjusting to not having someone else prepare him food. I remember waking up one morning and going to the kitchen and seeing him try to eat eggs and toast he had just prepared himself. He asked me how I normally prepare fried eggs because his tasted really crunchy. Turns out he had just cracked the egg hole into the pan and prepared it shell and all. I couldn't stop laughing, but felt really bad for the dude. No joke here. Back in high school, 90s, this kid got a brand new Chevy Camaro. I had an old ass 80s Pontiac Phoenix that had the straight 6. It was by far not a racing car, but this tool was just looking to brag at what he got compared to the busted cars we got. About 2 days later, while we were waiting at a stoplight, this idiot tries to race us as I'm in my car, and I pull up with my friends. He starts by revving it really loud and tries to do a burnout. Mind you, the light was red and the roads were not wet, so he managed to get a tiny burnout going, some smoke and whatnot. When his tires did catch traction, he went barreling into the intersection and smashed the car of the wife of one of the very few cops in my small city. Needless to say, that didn't work out for him very well. Know a guy whose dad was the CEO of a Fortune 500 company for around 10 years. Was playing video games on Discord with him earlier in the year when he drops this beauty: "My dad isn't paying for my rent anymore. I can't believe how hard budgeting is when I have to pay for my own rent. I can only go out drinking once a week now. Have you guys always had to watch what you spend this closely?" He turned 25 this year and has been out of college and working for 2 years. I knew this rich kid from high school that went off to college and partied every single night. His parents found out that he was failing basically all of his classes, so they secretly drove up early one Saturday morning with the spare set of keys to the car they had bought him and just drove off with the car. I knew a guy in high school who bragged that he didn't have to pay attention in school because, get this, his grandfather was a vice president of the corporation that supplied the cardboard for cereal boxes for General Mills. Real gravy train, yeah no. Last I checked, since deleted Facebook, he was still working at Best Buy 5 years after high school, same job he had in high school. One of my college roommates told his parents the trip we were planning, that they were paying for, was $400 more expensive than it was, so he could buy a really nice barn. In addition, they basically paid for everything he wanted. He had their credit card and ordered food on it at least once daily. He also would make $50 purchases off the card pretty regularly. Long story short, they found out he lied about the cost of the trip. For whatever reason they still paid and let him go, but after the trip he could not use their card anymore. This dude acted like he lived the hardest life of all time afterwards, but eventually sucked it up. He actually acts way less entitled now. It ended up having a lasting positive effect for him, even though he wouldn't admit it. A friend of mine from college, whose parents were rich enough to have a multi-million-dollar home in America and in Europe, used to shit on me for saying I was happy to go to whatever medical school I could get into. I ended up getting into my state school and she responded by saying that she could get into that school in a second because her mom has connections in the admissions department, but she would never bother applying there because it's not even a good school. She also made the same claim that her mom could get her into a specific top 20 ranked school. All through college she had this attitude with me about how, even though I was doing better than her in classes, I was going to go to whatever school would take me, and she was going to go to her dream school, because that's just how the world works. I checked up on her on Facebook this year, and she's not exactly at her dream school. It turns out she is at her state medical school, which is actually significantly lower ranked than the one she was making fun of me for attending. I don't want to say I was hoping she wouldn't get in anywhere, because that's a little harsh, but I was happy to see her get put in her place a little bit. For a couple of years in high school I went to this super expensive American private school in Switzerland. The company my dad worked for paid for almost all the tuition, so it was an amazing opportunity for me. Most of the kids in this school were either State Department or from American families living in Saudi. Saudi provided expat kids with school up until 10th grade, so you had to go to a school abroad to finish HS. There were, however, a few Saudi kids that were there, mostly so that they would be able to speak flawless English to help out their future careers. One of these kids, who I will call the prince, was somewhere in the line of Saudi succession, but honestly, he was like 1455th in line for the throne. Not a real contender for king, but his family was rich. Like rich in a way that most of us can't even imagine. This school had some rules, like you couldn't have a car as a student, even if you were old enough to get a license. Switzerland. This rule was a real buzzkill for the prince, but he made it through the year somehow. Over the summer after his junior year, he drove back to the school from Geneva in his Lambo, probably just because he could do it outside the school year. On his way up the mountain, the road is like a endless series of hairpin turns. He managed to flip his Lambo into vineyard while trying to navigate one of those hairpin turns. I'm guessing a Lambo has a lot of power, and he took it to heart. His parents, furious at what he had done, decided to punish him by replacing his Lamborghini with a Porsche. and the prince was so angry. He complained about it bitterly when the school year started up again. The rest of us kind of just looked at each other in amazement. Same planet, different worlds I guess. That one Instagram model who got caught on video talking shit to a security guard at VidCon. Not only did the guard stand his ground and not let him in because he wasn't famous enough to be given a pass and too rich to just buy one, but once the internet saw the video the guard ended up with more followers than the kid. Don't forget to consider the idea to maybe think about potentially subscribing. Peace.